Keegan Smith, welcome, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for rocking up on time.
On time, every time.
Yeah, and thanks, Gus Pegasus Gym, for letting us use this space. Keegs, you've been a massive role model for me in the person who I have become today, and still learning and still implementing things that you've taught me. I think I got in contact with you 4 or 5 years ago when where were you living? You just sold that place in Byron. Where'd you move after that?
We didn't own anywhere there. We might have moved out of Ewingsdale. Was that when
Yep.
we were when
Yep.
Sonny, when I had the camp with Sonny?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the end of 2016. It was just Manu was born at that house, so that's only 3.5
Oh, really?
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where'd you go after that?
time flies. From that house, we bought the property at Yukai.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was when we bought the place out there. So second child was like, we need to have our own base. Like we'd moved, that was our third place up there. Plus we'd been to Europe a couple of times and just a lot of moves, and we were trying to find a little bit more stability and thinking about what we could do. So yeah, we bought the place out at Yukai, 5 acres and bed and breakfast, and that was then.
That was a cool little hub, man. You used to see Mount Warning, from your porch, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great view of Mount Warning. First place in Australia to see the sun.
So good.
Yeah.
So Keegs, tell the people, I know about your backstory and stuff, but I would like to just tell a little bit more about who the old Keegan was, where you come from, family growing up, and what you were kind of into. So if you want to just start back from what you kind of can remember, who was Keegan back then?
I don't remember any past lives or anything like that, so we'll just start from I grew up in a sporting family. My parents were both pretty sporty, and obviously Rowan was obsessed with balls. Like Ari, my nephew is probably the kid that I've seen that's most obsessed with balls. I think Rowan was like that as well. So as his younger brother, I think I was just pulled into that vortex, and so we grew up in a pretty sporty and competitive environment. And I think I was always chasing as the younger brother, and I was a bit of a runt, and so I was always trying to keep up with him and with his friends. And we played a lot of sports as kids. We played everything, and our parents, mum really drove us around to learn all different sports. We played tennis and swimming, and we always had activities on pretty much, every day after school. So childhood was like that, and then eventually I found hockey, and I was finally actually able to sort of be good at something. I guess that's when I really decided that was the first organised sport that I really wanted to do. I tried a bunch of other stuff, but it never really stuck when I played footy or tennis, or I never really wanted to do that stuff beyond sort of just getting lessons. So yeah, played hockey, and then at some stage decided I wanted to go to the Olympics for that. I remember at school, one of the presentations was like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Olympics for hockey. So gradually that became more real to me, and I sort of started to solve what that would take, and trained a bit more and got into training and gym work and that sort of thing. And because Dad was obviously in rugby league, my dad was a rugby league coach, NRL, before it was NRL, but yeah, the ARL and all that. So he did that for 30 years. So I grew up in that environment. I think from a very young age, I was seeing big, strong guys who were sort of alpha guys. And so that was my vision of what a man is, I guess, from a very young age. And then, I played hard at hockey and didn't want to drink, didn't want to do all that stuff because I wanted to go hard at hockey. And I was too slow, I was too weak, I wasn't making the state teams, and it used to crush me. I'd go to state championships, I'd play for Illawarra, and we'd make the final, or we had good teams. A lot of teams that I played in sort of overachieved from what was expected, but I just couldn't make those teams. So that sort of drove me to get into weight training and, try not to be such a runt. And I was, told that, I'm just too small, too weak, even for hockey, which is a not very physical sport. So to be told you're physically inferior to such an extent that you're not going to make these teams. So that sort of drove me to get into that. And I started to read books on sports science and physiology and all those sorts of things. from around that age, like maybe 14, 15. I read a lot of autobiographies of athletes, like successful athletes. I remember reading Wayne Gretzky's book and Viv Richards, and some of your audience might not know who those guys are, but they're like legends of sport from a little bit further back.
Why'd you read though?
I wanted to be like those guys, like I wanted to understand like why. I just found it fascinating. I loved reading those books. I can still remember reading like Wayne Gretzky's book and Viv Richards' book, and just like I had like reverence for those books, like they were like some kind of Bible, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have a really religious upbringing, but those guys were sort of heroes, and I guess that was the culture of our family. Is like if you win and if you part of a winning team and that sort of stuff. Like I was around that all the time because we go to the footy games and it was like a huge deal whether Dad's team won or not. Like it was his profession and his mood changed a lot based on whether he won or lost. And so that was kind of the environment that I was brought up in. Like this guy's either a great athlete and he's worthy, or he's a rubbish athlete and he's rubbish. Like that was kind of like, as a kid, I think that's how my reality of what the world was. And so I wanted to be a good athlete.
Did that impact you sometimes? Like at night time, were you like second guessing yourself and that? Like through the hockey stages where you're told this, and then you got your dad who's also a coach, and you're like, man, am I good enough for my dad? Or, did you have that?
Yeah, like I wasn't super close with my dad, I wouldn't say, as a kid. Like he was kind of doing his thing, and I didn't really feel much of a connection with him, with my sport. Maybe it's like subconsciously, like I might have been trying to get approval or something with him, but I think it was more just about me and just about like, for my own sort of self-worth. But it was probably programmed in through that environment. But I was quite a nervous sort of kid. I remember like being really nervous about like whether I'd remember all my shit for school and like getting my assignments done and my homework and that sort of stuff. Like, and I think the only reason why I wanted to study and do stuff well for school was just to be near the top of the class. I didn't necessarily have to come first. I probably wasn't, but I had to be near the top. I think that's probably always been my standard of like, so yeah, like that was the main driver in school, was just like, where did I finish compared to everyone else? Like that was, it was always a ranking thing. And I guess that started probably pretty early in life. So, that was my up to 20 kind of, how life was. And then I went to university just pretty much because I was in no position to start full-time work. I hadn't really worked. I didn't really know what that was about. I didn't really like the idea of a job at all. I was quite entrepreneurial as a kid. Like I used to love it when we'd go car washing and like come home with like $200 cash. I'd be happy to be out there from like, 7 a.m. till like 4 in the arvo, 5 in the arvo, just knocking on doors and like I loved doing that sort of stuff and anything along those lines. Like I remember even from a young age, like I really liked that. I don't know, it was something inherently like rewarding about doing a job and making money, but I had no real interest in like getting a job at Macca's or something like that. Like even though I kind of liked like money and stuff. So I went to uni and I didn't want to be in the alcohol scene and all that sort of stuff, but I had started to get into it like a couple years after most of my friends did, but I did sort of fall into that, mostly just around insecurity around girls and just wanting to be like pretty much just, to decrease inhibition so I could actually, talk to girls and start to experience fucking sexuality, I guess. That was probably the biggest driver for alcohol with me. And went through the exercise science at university. At some stages, I really studied hard. I quite like school and like learning and that sort of thing towards the end. Like and through uni, like some of the subjects I really enjoyed and went pretty hard at. But it was, I didn't really know what I was doing with it. I didn't have like an image of like, I'm going to become this, guy who teaches a lot of people about strength and conditioning or exercise science or anything like that. I was just going through that and I just wanted to play hockey. And to be honest, like there was nothing really in that exercise science degree where I felt like this is going to help me go to the Olympics. Like there was probably no point where I felt like this is actually of use. And even once I started working, I did my work experience at Parramatta Eels. Dad was there at the time. Hayden Knowles was the head, who's done really, really well in strength and conditioning since then. And I didn't really relate to university at all. So, I started to get experience in that pro environment, and then I realized, well, I'm going to have to learn some stuff because I don't really have much to offer here. what I had most to offer was just what I'd done with my own training and just like my own experiences of actually training. So I got into coaching their youth squad and got some different experiences there with Hayden. I started to like that with coaching. I think I always liked coaching. I coached hockey teams from when I was pretty young as well, like 20. I started to coach some of the like under 15s and under 12s, and started to captain coach some of my teams when I was like 20, 21. Like I coached the Illawarra Open men's, and I pretty much always thought I was better than the coach at coaching from probably like 12, 13 years old. Like I would pretty much feel like it was my job to run the team, and like if he was doing something wrong or whatever, like do my head in from like pretty early on. I'd give the coaches a pretty hard time. Sometimes my teachers as well at school, like, yeah, I felt like, like you don't even know how to teach. Like I got this covered, like get out of my way, which is probably, still what I'm like to an extent. So, I mean, that's probably a good bit of my backstory, man, up to sort of early 20s.
For sure, yeah. And then you obviously, you were Parramatta, then you went Tigers?
Nah, so after Para, I left, I quit uni because I was like, once I started doing work experience, I realized like university was kind of like a rort, bit of a mafia thing. Fortunately, my parents had paid. They didn't pay for my brother, but they paid for me for some reason. So I didn't actually have a debt and stuff, but I was like, man, this is like, I got to get out of here. This is bullshit. So I'd done 3.5 years of uni and I quit, which meant I could still graduate from exercise science, but I didn't finish the rehab part. And I moved to England. So Rowan had just got a job over with the London Broncos, and I'd really like told him like, you should definitely go and do this. And I encouraged him really strongly to go over there. And then my life hit a little mini crisis, and I was like, I'm out of here. Quit uni, went to England. I think the day I arrived, Rowan said the day I arrived, I don't remember, but it's like close to when I arrived. I did some massage at the Broncos either the day or the next day, like fully jet lagged, went in and did massage because I'd already done a massage diploma as well while I was going through uni because I wanted to have something practical to offer because I realised the university degree was going to do next to nothing for my
I didn't know that.
prospects in
Cool.
life. Yeah, so I was doing massage at Para and I was getting paid a little bit for that, and then just volunteering, just working there for free, which would, like obviously they were doing me the service. Like a lot of guys come out of exercise science and stuff, they expect to be paid. Like I was completely useless. Like I should have been paying them to be in that environment, but doing the massage meant that I at least made some money. I was a pool lifeguard through uni and swim teacher and that sort of stuff as well. So that was sort of where I pulled a few dollars together. So I went to England, and then I went and played hockey for Reading Hockey Club, who were probably the best hockey club in England at the time, and that was pretty fun traveling around with them. And I tried to get work as a PT. So people ask me like, "Are you a PT?" That was the only time I was almost a PT, and I think I reckon I only ran about 5 or 6 sessions over the course of like a month or 6 weeks or something. I was living out of this place, and I worked out of this software company called Veritas, and they were like it was kind of like a Silicon Valley type thing. I don't know, like they were out in this industrial park, and they had this huge thing, and it was software development type stuff, and they had their own gym on site. It was a pretty cool gym, and like just one of those kind of companies, like a rich kind of company, so I got a job with them, but I had to like get my own clients kind of thing, and I don't remember the deal fully, but by the time I sort of started to get momentum and people started to be interested in training with me, I decided I didn't want to live there anymore, and I wasn't really settled. Like I was staying at this like sort of student house and just trying to find my way out there, and I ended up quitting the hockey team, and I moved back into London with my brother. That was my first time, I guess, living away from home, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to get myself going. And,
how old were you?
Like 21.
That's fucking pretty young to be travel all the way over the other side of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing to do. I think I'd had a really sheltered kind of upbringing. I think mum and dad had always, been pretty close, especially mum, and it was just always about hockey. Like my time away from home was like hockey camps and hockey tournaments, and that was really it. So it was good to get out, from under their wing as much. But yeah, it was pretty tough. I think I lived like 6 weeks, 2 months, and then went back into London and ended up picking up work. I did odd jobs and stuff, but then I picked up work with the London Broncos. So that was my next one after Para, to answer that question. So I worked with the London Broncos there for a year. I was assistant strength and conditioning, and massage. That was my role. So I had like the injured players, and there was a big injured list pretty consistently at that team. When I look back at it compared to like what it was like at the Roosters and stuff, is completely different. Often I'd have like 10, 12 guys that were in like the rehab group, where, at Roosters, like a lot of times there was 0, or sometimes, there was like 1 or 2. Every now and then it'd get up to like 5 or 6, or, on a bad day there'd be 8, but like there'd be super short term where London, it was like hectic. I had a big squad, and we'd go to swimming and boxing and extra weights, and that was my role. And then I ended up running the gym as well, because they had a weird setup where they had Steve Nance was like overseeing the whole program, but like remotely. And then there was Sean Tagg, who was the head of performance, and he was sort of implementing Steve Nance's program. But then at some stage, we agreed that I was going to write the programs, and so I was writing the program and running the gym in season that year, and I loved it. And I didn't probably know what I was doing that much, but I think it was valuable to have someone there who'd written the program, implementing the program, versus it worked fine as well with Steve Nance stuff. Like, I don't remember all the details of the programming and that, but yeah, that was a huge experience as a young guy. I guess I was 20, 21, 22, running the gym over there and doing that stuff. But then I decided I want to come home and play hockey again. So I practiced a lot of hockey. I got a lot stronger while I was there, working in that gym as well. I was reading Dan John stuff, and I started to learn my craft a bit more. Like, I was a big T Nation reader. Hayden Masters, who was he'd gone on to work with Wallabies and Waratahs, and he was there as the head of strength the year before I was there. So he put me on the T Nation. He was like, "Have you heard of T Nation?" I was like, "What's this?" And then I found it, and I was like, "Wow, this is epic."
I remember that, right?
Yeah, so T Nation in the early days, like that was when Poliquin's writing for it, Ian King, like early T Nation is epic. If people are listening in and they haven't listened, like they haven't read Poliquin's early stuff on T Nation and some of that early material, it's like hectic. And Mario Di Pasquale, Eric Serrano, like I started to get into these guys' work, which are still like obscure names that most strength and conditioning coaches probably have never heard of. They're not these evidence-based, like I don't know, like stay in line, don't be creative, don't think outside the box kind of dictators that kind of are the most dominant voices now in strength and conditioning, nutrition, that sort of thing. These guys were out there running some different ideas, and I loved all that stuff, and I started to implement it, and I got some wins with it. I remember I was deadlifting like 140, 160, cleaning 100, benching 110, 115, and thinking I was strong as. I was about 80 kilos, and it was but I definitely had some good gains. And then when I came back and played hockey again, like by that time I had become like one of the fastest, one of the strongest. I ran like a 15:10 beep test. I was, top couple in the state with the speed stuff. And I had made that transformation from being the kid that was too weak to make it. I actually made the senior men's New South Wales team, and I thought I should have been in the under 21s Australian team. We won the nationals, and felt like I was one of the key players, and I was really disappointed to miss out on the Australian under 21s team, which kind of would have put me on track for that Olympic dream. But just straight after those championships is actually when I moved to England, and was like, I don't know if I'm going to go that path. But I came back and was like, no, I'm going to have one more shot at it. So when I was like 22, I was training again to play in that New South Wales Open team and try and get into an Australian squad. That's why I left the London Broncos, and I came back. I was working at Para again at that time, and trying to prep myself to make that New South Wales team again. And then I just had jack of it. By that time, I'd listened to a lot of the lyrics and researched a lot of the lyrics of stuff like Rage Against the Machine and NoFX, and I'd read a lot of Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn, Bill Bloom, and this sort of stuff. So I got into like, how does the world work, and why is it kind of the way it is, and I was just asking a lot of deeper questions about like how society works and how the financial system works. And
you got that from Rage Against the Machine? I
was an angry young man. Yeah, Rage Against the Machine, if you listen to the lyrics, if you actually research what he's actually talking about, it's extremely deep. Like, he's a political scientist.
True.
And if you go into the references, like I would literally like look at the lyrics and go and find out what he's actually talking about. So he lived in the south of Mexico with the Zapatistas, and Che Guevara is kind of the symbol of Rage Against the Machine. So I read Che Guevara's there's a book, I think it's A Revolutionary Life, is the Che Guevara book. Anderson is the author. It's a big, thick red book. I read that while I was in England. And I read I read the Bolivian Diary first, which is actually the story of like when he died, when he was killed, living in the jungle in Bolivia, trying to emancipate the Bolivian population, like a revolution. That was after he'd been a part of the Cuban Revolution. Which
Who's that?
Che Guevara. Yeah.
Che, yeah.
Yeah. So so I read a lot of those books and I was inspired by it, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I always wanted better for myself, and then I think I by default sort of wanted better for other people. And I just look at 9 to 5, and even when I was going through uni, and I was like, what is all this bullshit with these health statistics? Like, people are dying. Everyone's dying from preventable disease. Like, it was really clear at that stage. Like, even before I read, Bruce Lipton saying like 95% of diseases are preventable. Like, it's not genetic. Like, everyone's being told it's genetic. You had genetic predisposition, and like the Human Genome Project and all that stuff, which, we know a lot of that stuff just hasn't manifested. Like, we haven't solved anything from that genetic level. And the genome, when we mapped it out, it didn't match up to what we thought. There wasn't like one gene for each thing and blah, blah, blah. But, I was angry going through university, like, we can easily fix this stuff, like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, dementia. We know how to fix all this stuff, like, to a large extent. Like, we could drastically decrease the incidence of this. The barrier to this isn't exercise science. The barrier to this is political science. The barrier to this is politics. It's economics. There's just no financial incentive. The financial incentive is to have a sick population, because healthcare is a huge part of the economy. So if everyone got well, the economy collapses. Like, it can't run without that. And war as well, like war and sickness are the two things that, the modern economy runs on. So I was reading these other perspectives, and, you read manufacturing, what's it called? Manufacturing Consent, I think is the one by Noam Chomsky. I read a bunch of his books, and Howard Zenn's People's History of America. Reading all this stuff as a young, guy in your 20s. Like, the last year of uni, I was like going to the library and reading political science, and then just getting my exercise science stuff done, like, get that out of the way. And then, like, I was reading the books about political science stuff, and I just was fascinated about what had happened in Latin America. I guess the inspiration was coming from Zach De La Rocha, and Zach De La Rocha he didn't know his father. Like, I guess that's having never seen the color of my father's eyes, like, is one of the lyrics. I guess he didn't know his father, and he grew up in America, and he was in a area that was predominantly white, I think, and he had that mixed genetic background, and so he sang a lot about Latin America, and he was really interested in Latin American politics. And when you get into American politics, they'll talk quite a lot about American intervention in Latin America. So they considered it their backyard, and it was their responsibility to run Latin America in a way that suited the United States of America. So, that became something I was just so fascinated with. And so I just needed to, I quit hockey, quit that stuff, and I was like, I got to go see what the world is about. So I wrote this long email. I wonder if I could actually.
So that's why you started to go traveling, because of that.
Yeah, man. I just needed to understand it for myself. So I just felt like I'd been sheltered and just didn't. I just wanted to feel it rather than. I'd read all these books about it, and I'm like, I'm gonna go see this thing. Like, I'd started teaching myself Spanish while I was in London, and whenever we'd go out partying and stuff, like, I'd meet people from all over the world, and like, they would speak different languages and stuff, and I was like, man, I'm so ignorant. Like, why didn't I learn another language? Like, I went to school I was going to schooling from 3 years old until 21. Like, I'd been there like 18 years, and I only spoke one language. Like, surely they could have taught me another language at that time. I did have language classes and stuff, and I was like, but this is not set up right. And then I started to have my conspiracy theories to myself, I guess, of like, hey, this school stuff, like, they're not teaching us. They're not really trying to help us live a good life here. This is bullshit. Like, they're trying to teach us to fit inside this system that doesn't even want us to be healthy, doesn't even want us to be smart. Like, what do they want from us? It's like they develop you to a point so you fit in the machine, but Rage Against the Machine, you know what I mean? It's like, fuck that machine. So,
but how can I just stop you? How when you're reading these books, are you just invested in that from front to back, or you skim read, like underline, like look into that? Like, how are you reading books?
at that time, I hadn't been exposed to any of those kind of
Really?
techniques. Like, I did read 4-Hour Work Week around that time as well. I don't remember exactly when that was released or exactly when I read it, which is Tim Ferriss's book, which is like a Bible for kind of entrepreneurs. And some stage through all this, like I bought shares with my money that I was making from being a pool lifeguard. So I had like a little bit of money saved, and I was always like, I'm not getting, so the reason with buying shares and managed funds and stuff is like, I'm not going in the rat race. Like the rat race is not the place for me. I'm never working 9 to 5. Like, fuck that shit. So I don't know if you've got a language warning on your podcast.
No. I swear a fair bit.
Sweet. So yeah, like I read Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki as well, which I'm listening to him a lot at the moment. And he's going really hard with like, they're trying to make us ignorant. You know, listen to Mike Maloney. Mike Maloney worked for Robert Kiyosaki for a while. Mike Maloney has goldsilver.com, and he's really teaching people about wealth and wealth cycles. And at some point you realize that economic sovereignty is a part of, you know, mental sovereignty and your ability to make decisions in life. The majority of people, from what my perspective, they don't have time to look up, look around, think, or they feel like they don't because they're working 9 to 5 and they just under that constant financial pressure, which is manufactured by consumerism, you know? And it's like, why do we want to buy all this stuff? Why do we keep getting? Because I lived in Mexico, slept on dirt floors in houses made out of timber. I was like, this isn't, people aren't necessarily less happy because of material stuff, right? Like, so, and they were giving up that life to go lay bricks in Mexico City or go across the border illegally into the US and then buy cars and then buy TVs. And I was seeing this cycle of like, when you jump more and more into the capitalist economy, like what actually happens to people. And everybody wanted to do it. Like, it's a normal thing to want to evolve and progress, and that was their vision of progression. But I was sort of seeing for myself, like, this isn't the only way, this isn't the only solution. Like, how can we live differently? How can we live better?
Well, you're not thinking for yourself. You're like back in school, and the teacher's telling you what to eat, what to do, how to think. You know, a lot of people don't think for themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't like, oh, what's a healthy meal? Oh, I'll just look at this ad. This is healthy. Oh, that must be healthy because you're getting told what to fucking do. You know, a lot of people do not think and just want to be told this is good, instead of doing your own research and then finding out for yourself the answers. Like,
yeah. I definitely have a big pleaser component to me, and I do fall in line to an extent as well. Like, it's a funny thing. Because I had those sports science, like sports nutritionists. When I was in Illawarra Academy of Sport, we'd have the sports nutritionists come along, and they'd be like, you know, drink all your Milo and your Sustain and smash all your cereals and all that sort of stuff. And I got pretty sick, like in my late teens, as a result of a lot of that sort of stuff. And through my 20s as well, like I had a lot of gut issues and just a lot of health issues. I had a lot of health issues, like pretty much up until I decided to stop doing everything like everyone else. Like even until carnivore diet, like I never really had my health like where I felt like it was under control, which is only like 3 years ago.
Really?
And so it was always a battle of like, how do I get healthier? I had a lot of injuries in hockey as well, like overuse injuries especially, where my body just wasn't adapting enough, like shin splints and stress fracture type stuff and break bones and compartment syndrome type stuff, and just, a lot of, issues. I went to physio so many times and took a lot of anti-inflams and anti-inflammatory creams and all that sort of stuff. And I just I wanted to solve things, but I did try, like I tried what the sports nutritionist said. Like I ate super low fat for like 2-3 years, like during the time when all my, my hormones should have been kicking in. Like maybe that was part of the reason I was a late bloomer, is because I was just eating super low fat because that's what they told me to do. And then I was having, I had injuries and stuff off the back of that. And the reality is that most sports teams, and many sports teams, sports nutritionists are still towing that line. Like they're millennia behind, but
How's
like
the fucking NRL, bro?
the research is yeah. I mean, it really is pretty crazy. Like what the athletes are being told, and then that has a huge impact on mental health. That has a huge impact on suicide rates. It has an impact on depression. It has an impact on those sorts of things, and your ability to think clearly, look around, ask questions, like is massively impacted by your diet. So,
well, let's go to that then. You travelled over Latin America for how long?
I lived there for a bit over 3 years in total, but I went back and forward between Australia. So from like 23 to 28, I kept going backwards and forwards between Latin America and Australia.
And you were just experiencing of what you had heard in Rage Against the Machine and read books and stuff. You just wanted to go experience that for yourself. And then you ended up at the Roosters.
Next was Catalan Dragons.
But I want to get to the part where you're at the Roosters, because that's where you kind of made a solid name for yourself, yeah? Would you say?
I went pretty hard with Twitter and blogging and stuff in England. I got to like 5,000 followers on Twitter, and I started to build like a bit of an audience and stuff in France and England. And I was just trying to learn as much as I could and share the best I could. I went to my first Poliquin events over there. I met Charles Poliquin and did a one-to-one consult with him when I was in England. And I'd started to get some sort of momentum going over there during that 2 years in France and some connections into England. And then, sort of had to start again once I got to Australia, because I didn't really have any audience in Australia beyond sort of my mates and hockey and that sort of thing. But I built the habit of blogging, like even during my travels. I had a thing called searchingforchange.blogspot.com. So I blogged about my travels like from maybe 2007. I think it's still online.
Still up?
Yeah, I think so. It was up. I haven't checked for a few years, but I used to write these posts about what I was seeing and put some photos and stuff from the adventures in Latin America. So gradually, I guess, I had a mailing list of thousands even during my travels. So I guess I was always kind of collecting connections, and just came sort of natural to me to try to share the best of what I'd been learning and that sort of thing. And then, in Australia, I started to do some seminars, and I definitely saw the Roosters and working in the NRL as like an opportunity to grow an audience, and I never really thought that was going to be my career. I didn't see footy as a long-term thing because of everything that I'd been through with the backpacking, and like it wasn't really backpacking. I call it backpacking, but it was, I don't know, something else. It was like a pilgrimage and exploration. Like I didn't do any tourist stuff. Like I literally I probably did like 5 tourist things over the 3 years. Like I wasn't doing that. I wasn't hanging out in that scene. It just wasn't what I was there for, kind of thing. So like once I was back to Australia, I wanted to put it to use, everything that I had, those experiences over there. I wanted to make a difference in the world, and I knew that I had to get some momentum personally. I had to get myself healthy again. I had to be training, and I knew that there was an element of like leverage and credibility that came with working with those pro teams. And if I could win with those teams, like that would help me to actually make a difference in the world. That was definitely somewhat, like that was pretty front in my sort of psyche of why I worked in sport.
Yeah, for sure. And
this is more a means to an end than actually like what I wanted to do.
Yeah. What was the energy like there when you rocked up to the Roosters? What year was that as well?
So 2012, the end of 2012, I arrived there, and the gym was like a junkyard. Just had bits and pieces of all sorts of stuff, which a lot of footy gyms are kind of like that. And I looked at the old programs, what they've been doing the year before. I've had contact since with the strength coach who was there before I was there, and I think he's a good guy, and I think he was, doing his best. I think he's actually a smart coach. But for whatever reason, which happens in a lot of teams, they'd fallen into some kind of maintenance holding pattern with the way they were training the guys and looking at the numbers and stuff. I was like, this is not good. This is like, because my dad was the head coach, right? The year before I was there, my dad and my brother were there, and they both got sacked. So they both lost their jobs, and going in there, I was like, like, how do you guys feel about me going in there after you've just been sacked? Like, it's the same management. And they were like, that's footy. Like, if you want to do it, you know, you go and do it. Because I knew I couldn't really stay in France with Trent Robertson, the head coach, leaving. I was like, I don't think this place is going to evolve forward from what it had been. Like, it'd been 2 exciting years because they came last the year before we got to France. And then that first year we made the playoffs. The second year we were first place for a number of weeks. And, you know, we were still like really a solid top 4 team. So we'd gone from like, you know, them being the bottom team the year before we were there to like a really solid club. A lot of the French players came through and started playing. And it was quite exciting. I really enjoyed seeing like guys going from, you know, not being Super League players to. So that was great, but I was like, I can't stay here. If it's going to go backwards, so I'm either going to go travel again, go in a different direction with my life, or I'm going to go NRL. And it was really tough for me. I didn't really know what it was. Like, Katie had just moved to live with me, who's now my wife. I was like, babe, I want to go to Australia. You're going to come with me? And she was like, yep. Which was a tough decision for her. Like, she was just at uni. She was pretty young. She was like 22, 23. And she was meant to be at uni, and she's an only child and moving away from her family and everything. So it was a huge move. We moved to Australia. And then I got to, the Roosters, the culture there was like, I knew everything had to change, like in the gym. And the talk in the papers and stuff was like that Trent Robinson was like an interim, that he was just like, that Craig Bellamy was going to come in the year after, and that like there's already been an offer on the table for Bellamy, and this kind of stuff was in the paper, that he wasn't really going to be the, like it wasn't a long-term thing, like there was no real opportunity there kind of. So our kind of talk, or the way I remember it, is that like, let's just go all in. Let's just go hard with this. And if it doesn't work, okay, but like, let's not die wondering. So we went in with like a sledgehammer approach of like, we're just going to go hard with these guys. And if they break, you know, so be it. But if we can keep them together, then, you know, we're going to make an impact here. Like, and they had finished, I think, 13th, maybe the year before, 14th, like near the bottom. It wasn't a good year. Like, that's, you know, why my dad and my brother had moved on. But when I looked at the physical stuff, I was like, well, strength and conditioning is a big part of rugby league, and that hasn't been done well here, in my opinion. Like, looking at what, you know, everyone says that when they go into a new program, but looking at the weights and stuff, I'm like, I know we can do better than this. So it was cool because it was like open slather of like, you know, like make a difference here. You know what I mean? Like,
can only go up. Yeah.
Both the teams that I went to where I was the head of the program, like they were at the bottom. So it's kind of brings an opportunity. Like, some people hate going into those sort of teams. It's like, oh, it's a poison chalice, and, you know, like you're going to get a bad reputation because you go to a bottom team. But I just saw it as opportunity of like, you know, we're going to pump this, and, you know, like we're going to go to another level. And it was interesting to see, like, it happened in France, and it was like, obviously these guys can get a lot better. Like, let's do this, let's do that. And I knew a bunch of stuff straight away. Like, this is going to, and then, but coming to NRL, it's like, these guys have probably already like been really well trained. Like, they're NRL players. Like, what am I going to do for, you know, when Sonny Bill signed, I was like, what am I going to do for Sonny Bill Williams? Like, you know, he's already been at the top of the game for such a long time. And all these other guys like Michael Jennings and, you know, Boyd Cordner, and what am I going to do for these guys? Do I even have anything to offer? Like, that was, you know, everyone has those self-doubts, and that was my feeling going in there. And then I saw the numbers, and I was like, oh, sweet, like, this is going to change. So I'd actually been on a 10-day formation with Phil Richards, who just recently spoke at our seminar, but I was meant to go and do my PICP 3 and 4, so the Poliquin education. At one time, the Poliquin education was really the benchmark. Like, if you're a serious coach, then you need to go do Poliquin strength and conditioning courses. And on some level, that's probably where RealMVMT started in my mind as well. Like, I want to build something like this, but do it better. And that's what my life's about now. But I was meant to do the Poliquin 3 and 4, and then there was a hurricane, and you couldn't get flight into New York. So my flight got cancelled. So I went and spent 10 days in Wales, in shithole little town, with Phil Richards. And he just said to me, no, like, don't mess around with all that Poliquin structure balance stuff. Like, get in there and go hard. And so I did. And we did a lot of max effort stuff, and the guys improved a lot. They hadn't trained in the way that we did. I mean, it was completely different. We pretty much maxed out every session in that first preseason in 2013. And the reason why it worked is because they weren't strong, because they were at like 60%. And so they were maxing out. And I was like, that's shit. like that's not strong. And there were a few guys that were strong, but I just felt like we were so far away from their potential that even when they thought they were maxing out, they just weren't really. And because they were like big, strong guys, like structurally it was there. So it's like they'd done bodybuilding, but they'd never learned to innovate their muscles. They'd never learned to produce power. I remember Marty Kennedy like clean and jerking 120 kilos and the team just going nuts. And like we used to have a lot of fun in there, but the accounting department was above the gym. And the players were like jumping up and down, like all in a huddle, just screaming at each other, like just kind of spontaneously when he hit like the best lift of the day. And I'd be screaming in there all the time. And the accounting department would be like, what are you guys doing in the gym? And I was like, we're doing something different, but let's see how it goes. And it was never like that before. And I was like, yeah, let's see if it's like that on the field as well. So, you know, it was a lot of fun, man. Sonny came in late. He had a pec tear. And, yeah, it was like Sonny wanted to train at a separate time on his own because he'd missed a lot of the preseason. And so he saw all the other guys like going super hard, and that had become the normal for the gym. Was like forwards are in, the scores are all going up on the board. Like, this is the number you're going to hit today. You know, who's going to be the leader today? And I would like, a lot of sessions there, I would like pump the guys up so much. Like, I'd be fucking screaming, and it was just like full energy in there. And Sonny was like, didn't feel like he was ready for that because he'd come from rugby, he'd been in Japan, he had a boxing fight 4 months after his pec tear.
Was he always a solid trainer though?
Yeah, crazy, man. Like, amazing work ethic, super dedicated, but it's just whatever system he'd been in, where he's like, well, but super competitive as well, and somewhat self-conscious around that, and somewhat like, he's always looking for the best. So he'll ask the question of like, you know, am I the best here? You know, and is, you know, yeah, he wanted to be at the top all the time. And so if he knew he wasn't going to be at the top, then he kind of was like, well, let's fill in the gaps here. Like, let's, you know, and it was smart because it may have broken him if he'd have just jumped in with what everybody else was doing. And I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, it was a new program for me, even to run that style. Like, it was completely different to how I ran things in France. I'd set the gym up differently, and the culture was different. And we went away from like having a sheet, because even at Catalan Dragons, like, we couldn't run a lot of guys on the same movement at the same time. We didn't have enough gear for it. So we'd run like these little circuits, and they'd have the sheet, and it'd be like 3 weeks of programming on the piece of paper, or 4 weeks on the program. So by the second, third week, that piece of paper was all bashed up, and the guys were like bored with it. And in season, like, you know, they'd have a niggle or whatever. So it wouldn't work for so many different reasons. Like, that style of doing things, which is kind of like how everybody did things, like in on-paper programming and that sort of thing. It's sort of like textbook, you know, but that stuff's all based on Olympic cycles and individual athletes. It just doesn't work in a team sport environment, in my experience. So I canned that, and we had like, they still had their piece of paper. It was like a new piece of paper each week. So they write down all their scores, and I log all the data and all that sort of stuff. And I tell them what I wanted them to lift on every working set. So it was pretty tightly run because we were changing the culture, and they weren't used to it and stuff. And they were like, man, this guy's strict, and this guy's like, you know, but they got better. And yeah, I mean, it was fun to have that challenge with Sonny, and he definitely got some pretty good gains pretty quickly. And it was like, it was really obvious some things that weren't working right in his body, and he knew they weren't working right, and he wanted them to be better, you know. So
did you help him with nutrition as well during this? Or
I was already, yeah, like, I was into it, and I was definitely talking to the players about it. I went in pretty hard with it. I mean, right at the start in France, I remember doing a lecture that was like kind of like a Weston A. Price type.
True, yeah. I just finished that book.
Yeah. Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. You wanted to touch on books. Nutrition and Physical Degeneration is probably the most important book on nutrition. It was written in the 1930s. I'm not sure if anyone's ever written anything more important about nutrition. I've read probably 50, maybe 100 nutrition books.
It just feels right, man. Like, even
so
if
special.
Like, when you read it, you're like,
all the photography as well.
Yeah, it's like you don't get a feeling of, oh, this guy's talking shit. It just kind of like, this is what we're missing out on. This is how we're meant to be fucking eating. You know what I mean? And like, the data's there, the photos are there of the kids who are,
and the teeth,
bone
structure.
So if you want to elaborate, Weston A. Price was a dentist that went traveling the world because of, what did he go traveling of? He thought there was
he was seeing all that, like the teeth were terrible in Europe, and you know, in the Western world the teeth were terrible, and he saw that when, slaves or people from other parts of the world arrived, they had these perfect teeth. And it's like, we're missing something. What's going on here? So it's the question you ask, he asked the question. So then he spent like 10 years, 8 years traveling the world with his wife and just took photos everywhere and analyzed this community is within range of white people food, of modern food, processed food. And this community is too isolated because there's no real line of communication. So this one's near the port and this one's like over the mountain. And they're exactly the same tribe, exactly the same people. These ones, the bone structure's off. There's all sorts of...
mouth breathing.
Yeah. The kids aren't being born right. Structural changes, skeletal changes, behavioral changes. And he did research around prisoners as well and delinquent behavior and that sort of thing. It's the most important, it just lays it out so clearly. You can see it across thousands of different journal articles now and all sorts of different researchers, but he was just like one guy who just put it all together and saw the big picture. And so that the people who were eating their traditional diet, perfect teeth, perfect bones, etc., and then as soon as they went on, and then even like when it arrived, so the first 2 kids were born before it arrived, and then kids 3, 4, and 5 were born after it arrived. Kids 3, 4, and 5 are deformed. Kids 1 and 2 look, perfect like their ancestors, perfect structure. This was just black and white. It is that black and white, but you don't get that black and white scenario in Australia because the kid might have 2 healthy meals a week, and there's just, you don't have that black and white contrast to be able to, well, that was like really control groups of modern diet versus traditional diet. And so just such powerful research. And the Pottinger's cats is the other one. Like Weston A. Price, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration and Pottinger's cats are like the 2 main books of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And
that's another
Paul
book.
Check kind of put me onto Weston A. Price Foundation, which put me onto Weston A. Price's stuff. Pottinger's cats is Dr. Pottinger, who did research on kittens and cats, and he changed their diet. So he either gave them pasteurized milk and cooked meat, or he gave them like raw liver, or he gave them raw milk. And he was doing adrenal gland studies. So he was taking the adrenal glands out of kittens and seeing like what would help them to survive. And he knew that they had a much higher chance of dying. And he was like, they were dying too much for his experiment to work if they weren't on the raw food. If they weren't getting like their diet, what cats are meant to eat, then too many of them would die after the intervention that he couldn't run the study. So then he ran the study about what makes cats die and the quality of their breeding. So he would see that within 2 or 3 generations, if they only had the cooked meat, if they had the pasteurized milk, within 2 or 3 generations, again, bone deformities, mental delinquency with the cats. And then if they didn't go 4 generations, they could be rehabilitated with traditional foods. So like the next generation would be a bit better, and then like they could actually get back to like their genetic strength. So this generational concept of generational health and genetic momentum, like it's all in, we teach it in Real Movement, but it's not something that's,
how does that transition over to
university?
humans?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
In my opinion, like you see it in animal breeding. Like anyone who does animal breeding will understand this, the runt of the litter and what you do with the runt. And, good breeders understand, you need to feed them this. If you feed them that, you don't get to be a good breeder. Like if you own a top quality racehorse, what are you going to feed it? Are you going to feed your racehorse Coca-Cola and, Cocoa Pops? Everyone says no. Like if you had a pet monkey and you loved the monkey, would you let it eat McDonald's? Would you? So what are you doing with your kid? What are you doing with yourself? Like you wouldn't even consider, like if you went to the zoo and they had a bunch of shit from the supermarket in the lion's food enclosure,
Mars bars and shit,
you'd be like, this is animal abuse. Like call the RSPCA. And yet what about abuse to humans? What about abuse to our children? What about abuse to ourselves?
Why? Is there even an argument why you would not?
It's money and power. It has to be money and power. Money is just a vehicle, right? It's just a change of energy.
Or is it ignorance in the human being? It has to be as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to have stupid people. You have to have a stupid society. You have to have a brainwashed society. we get an education, but we get an education in what's wrong instead of what's right. So it's just an indoctrination. You can't convince anyone that would be a smart diet to use in a zoo, or if animals in the wild, when the animals start to eat eating from our rubbish or whatever, like they're not going to be as healthy. You see those mangy dogs in Latin America and stuff that are like living on human scraps. As soon as the animals go out in the wild and they get to do what they're meant to be doing, they like health is able to be recovered. And to some extent, we can recover our health to a large extent, but some of it is going to take a while. Some of it is actually generational, and to me, it's very clear that there's a war on health. There's a war on health. Like to think otherwise is not to think. If you really look into what are we being taught to eat, how are we being taught to live? Animals in captivity, they stop being able to reproduce. The primary objective of many powerful people and organizations is decreasing birth rates. And they're open about that. They're pretty open about decreasing birth rates. You put animals in the zoo in an environment that's not favorable to their health, they stop being able to reproduce. So what we've created is a human zoo. We've created an unlivable or barely livable environment for zoos, for humans. Concentrated housing. Some people would call it concentration camps. And when you're living in that concentrated environment and you're living on kibble, you're living on gruel, you're living on slave food, we know like through history with slaves, we look back at times of slavery, it's just a different number system today. It's just a different game of how the slavery is set up. There's degrees of freedom, and there has been a relatively high degree of freedom for a number of years, gradually decreasing. And very, very clearly at the moment, our freedoms are being decreased. They're being encroached on. And the education that we've had encourages a lot of people to accelerate the encroachment of those freedoms, to praise it, to say thank you. Thank you for decreasing my freedom. Thank you for...
It's fucking crazy.
It's crazy. And welfare is a huge part of it, and food control is a huge part of it. You see in Latin American communities, I lived out in Indigenous Australia as well, in the outback, and you see as soon as, welfare is the thing that's what, you look back and people criticize the missionaries, the mission camps, like the missions were where okay, white man knows that everything, praise the Lord, praise Jesus, otherwise you're a bad person, you're a devil worshipper, you're going to hell. Okay, so you need to be Christian, otherwise you're a bad person. You need to put these clothes on, you need to cover your genitals, you need to eat this stuff. Forget about how you understood the universe worked, forget about your spirituality, your connection with nature. These are the rules now. This is what you need to do, or we kill you, or you'll be persecuted, or you don't get to eat. And they part of the deal was these highly addictive processed foods. So they put them on these rations, and then their minds would change, their bodies would change, and they were on those addictive foods, but they would have a constant food supply. And that's what it is now, So
that's fucking so sad, man, when you think about that. When you just put that in perspective for me, what people must have been going through back then.
It's brutal, man. Yeah, like some of the people that I met out there, that they'd seen their first white person in their 20s. Like I met people who, that was their reality. And in the mountains of Mexico as well, if you look at the history where I was, they'd had roads and electricity for 10 years. And they spoke their, their Tzotzil was the language where I was. They spoke their indigenous Mayan language, and Spanish was very much a secondary, new thing. And same with English in where I was in Apachula, in Fink. The Yankunjara, Piranjara, Aranda, they were the languages that they spoke, and that town was people were sort of thrown together there. And there was actually some Afghan blood as well, because the Afghanis had come with camels to build the rail line between Adelaide and Darwin. So there was Afghani blood in their bloodlines, in their communities as well. But at one stage, they were fenced off from the community where I lived, and they weren't allowed to go in there. I mean, they were treated and considered as flora and fauna in Australia until the 70s. They were only given the right to vote and considered human from the 70s. Even though Captain Cook discovered Australia, in 77, and the settlement was in the late 1700s, early 1800s was mostly the settlement, it was, 150, more than 150 years later where Indigenous Australians were considered to be humans, So when you look at all that history and those stories of like, what are the real values of the most powerful people? And at that time it was coming from royalty. Now where's the power? Twitter, Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. That's where the power is today. But you'll see that the connections are still there with the royal families and all those sorts of things. And are we really more civilized? Have things really progressed, or are the values that were there during the time of slavery, during the time of the exploration and colonization, or is it just like a continuum of things that have gone on from that point? And to me, it feels like this is a really, really key time in human history, and I think that that's been written about with the Mayan calendar and those sorts of things. But if you get into the work of people like Greg Braden, I think we're at a really, really important time in history where we have to choose freedom, or we choose submission, choose slavery. And part of it is what you eat. A big part of it is how you think. Is it okay to ask questions? It causes cognitive dissonance. Like, you can't deal with it when you actually start to question this. Like, you mean our government doesn't want us to be healthy? Like, how could you say that? How could you? You're a conspiracy theorist. You're crazy. You're a madman. But I mean, that just was obvious. Like, that was self-evident from looking at the statistics. When you're 20 years old and you're going through university, and it's like, oh, if you strength train, this happens to your blood sugar. And yet diabetes is causing mass amputations, and diabetes is increasing in prevalence. And type 2 diabetes, which was like adult onset diabetes is what it's called, now affects lots of children. It's, when you're looking at this stuff and you're just looking at the research and you're like, this doesn't add up. They're telling them to eat sugar. Everything's set up so you don't get strong. We become weaker and weaker, and we have less and less muscle mass, because that's what the modern, sit in your cubicle, drive to work. Everything's about sitting down, relax, chill out, be on the couch. It's like they're trying to suspend us like those cattle that just are sitting in a sling and just eat in a sling until they, it's got their Kobe Wagyu or something, I think it's called. They eat like they're on like alcohol and like
beer,
yeah, exactly, all that stuff. So they got like the most marbled meat. That's the perfect human life right now. Like that's like it's the least active you are, like the further you fit into that thing. So now it's a war on gyms. You've mentioned you hear them talking over and over about these are the rules for gyms. These are the rules for gyms, as they've put this intervention into place. They've spoken about gyms so much. I've never heard the government speak about gyms before. But now that they're closing them down, now it's front and center. What's the most important company in the world? What's the most important movement that's happened to the world in the last couple of decades? In my opinion, it's CrossFit. They told people, eat paleo. They told people, get strong. They told people, like, stand up. Stand up for yourself. Stand up. I believe that, that's the most important company to have hit the world for a long time. I ask it sometimes on my Instagram, like, I like putting questions out there and encouraging people to think, what if that, who else is even having a go? People throw up things like Sea Shepherd and that sort of stuff. I'm like, bro, how can sea life be the most important thing when look at what we're doing with the land? Like, look at what we're doing with the environment. Like, we've been causing mass extinction for a number of years now. Where in the current system and ideology is that being improved? Like, how in this current economic system and mindset are we not going to continue to cause mass extinction? And humans are at the top of the list. Humans are the ones that are suffering the most. If you look at the research of Weston A. Price, just like a lion in the wild, there was no evidence of osteoarthritis, of cancer, of heart disease, of dementia. When you look at there are read the stuff, read the reports, read the books of the early explorers. When they went to somewhere like Samoa, they were like, man, these people are so healthy. They're so happy. Like Samoa, like those islands in the Pacific, they had a lot of boats. Like, they were boat people in terms of, like, they really knew, they navigated the seas, they knew the seas in the 1400s. And the way we were told history is that the Europeans were the first people to go out and explore the world. That's a lie. the drawings are there from when they turned up, and there's like thousands of boats. So the Polynesians went to Latin America, you know, they populated Latin America. There's a really cool book. It's called Kentucky. Kentucky that's what it comes from. The guy actually reproduced it. So he made a boat out of the timber and stuff in Latin America, and he sailed it across to the Polynesian islands. I think 4 other guys in like the 60s or something. He had this theory, like, it's a lie. Like, people have been traveling back and forth across here. Like, this is where they're saying we come from. This isn't true. And it's like, no one would believe him. Everyone's, you know, you're a madman. So he's like, jam it, I'm going to make it happen. So he built the boat and sailed it across, like, with technology that could have been created, you know, 100, you know, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. So I love that. Just go and prove it. Like, just go out and prove it. If you can't, you know, it's funny I'm saying prove it. I have a business and prove it. But it's like, that's I guess what my life is about, and what we do with Real Movement is like, there is no question. There's no need for debate. It doesn't matter about the studies. Once you live it, once you experience it, you know it's truth. Like, it's one thing to read about it in a journal, and I like reading journals. I like reading books. But once I've embodied it, once I've experienced it, then you can't unlearn that. Once you've done CrossFit and you've eaten that diet, and you can't unlearn that. And it's highly addictive. You know, CrossFitters, like, all they want to talk about is CrossFit. It's highly addictive because it's a culture, and, you know, you experience yourself, you become self-empowered, you become powerful. So right now there's a war on gyms because there's a war on health, and the fitness scene was going viral. CrossFit gyms went viral. How many gyms? There's 15,000 CrossFit gyms. And this gym that we're sitting in right now, to a large extent, is a spin-off of a CrossFit gym. Like, Real Movement is kind of a spin-off of CrossFit. Like, there's definitely a lot of, like, inspiration, motivation has come from CrossFit, Poliquin, and that's what creativity is. Creativity is like looking at the best ideas of your time and synthesizing the next evolution of that. And that's, you know, that's what we're doing. That's what we're working on. But community gyms, people coming back to train in groups, like, there's a war on that. People think that, because I'm in touch with a lot of gym owners and such, and they're like, when's it opening back up again? It's going to take a lot more than towing the party line. Those gyms are not coming back online, in my opinion. Like, without people standing up and saying, like, no, this is going to happen. Because still at the moment, the majority, like, there's power in the citizenship. You know, there's you know, you have to look at where the power is and what people can do. So there's a lot of influence in things like TV, Facebook. They have a lot of influence, but ultimately right now there's still a super high degree of freedom. If this gets published and it doesn't get shut down, then we've still got that degree of freedom. And you can see it all the time at the moment. If you're watching London Real, if you're watching, you know, David Icke and these sorts of things. I listened to a podcast yesterday, amazing podcast, a woman just breaking down exactly what's going on, what the coronavirus situation is, like her view on it. And just breaking down vaccines, breaking down the history of AIDS. And this is a woman who's like PhD. She'd done a lot of key research around, like, viruses and she's saying exactly what's going on right now, exactly like the truth of the situation. Right now we have the opportunity to express that truth. If you express it on YouTube and it starts to get popular, it will be taken down, right? There was the one of the doctors, it had got up to 5 million views, got taken down. 2 American doctors saying, like, exactly what's going on, gets taken down. David Icke and London Real, Brian Rose.
Probably the biggest podcast that could have went to air, eh?
It was the second highest viewed thing that day, and it was really going wild, and so they took it down. And his LinkedIn account got closed. So it wasn't just this content. It's like, no, we're deleting you now from a Microsoft-based technology. You don't exist to us anymore. You can't be on our platform. Brian Rose, who's a mainstream guy, like, he's not a conspiracy theory crazy guy. One thing is to take down David Icke's content and say David Icke's a madman. But Brian Rose, he did a movie with Ido Portal. You know, Ido Portal, something close. You know, we've done a lot of work together. You know, I went and interned with him. Like, he's a really mainstream guy in fitness. Brian Rose made a movie with him. He's been on, lots of different things with guys like that, with Robert Kiyosaki and with, Dan Pena, a lot of mainstream stuff that Brian Rose does. Brian Rose, you don't exist anymore in the digital world of Microsoft, at LinkedIn. You don't exist. Literally, you're erased because you spoke with this guy and you dared to publish that. And when we told you, hey, you can't do that, you didn't toe the line. You didn't say, oh, sorry, you're the authority.
Do you think Joe Rogan's in that category?
I don't see any signs that Joe Rogan isn't towing the party line now. I think he did some interesting stuff. I haven't seen an interesting podcast from him for a long time.
Remember on like the Rhonda Patricks and all that, nothing on really health has really come out in a couple of years, really.
Yeah, I haven't been following it super close, and I love the work that he's done. I think Joe Rogan's had a huge positive impact on the world. I watched his Alex Jones one not too far back, and Alex doing that was really controversial. So I don't know what he's going to do next. I think he's a key player. Society's hungry for truth, and they're asking questions. And most people know when a politician's lying because their lips are moving. It's like, who believes those guys? How can you believe them? We've known for a long time about a lot of things that's not where truth comes from. Now all of a sudden, it's wonderful. They're offering all this welfare. To be on welfare at any point up until this stage in my life, you've been a doll bludger. You've been there's been a really negative thing. You've been a bad citizen.
Yeah.
Right now, we'll double the welfare. Just get on the welfare. Get involved. We're going to look after you. What is welfare? It's a pacifier. What is a pacifier? It's a dummy. It's a thing you give kids to suck on.
To make them feel comfortable.
To make them feel comfortable, baby. It's a pacifier. That's another word for dummy, is a pacifier. So welfare is a pacifier. Why do we need a pacifier right now? Because without that pacifier, the world would be lit up right now. You throw the world into a depression. You decrease employment rates at the fastest rate that's ever been ever happened in history. Any other time anything like this happened, everyone's on the streets. What's the rules at the moment?
Yeah.
So you take away employment, you crash the economy, and you say, take this pacifier while we continue to steal the wealth. So every time they print money, that takes away from anyone who has existing money. So they increase the current money supply, and that dilutes the pool. If you're playing Monopoly and someone just keeps putting money in, it changes the game. So right now, printing money, cash machine, print. What does that mean for society? It means everything that you own is getting diluted. Who's spending that money that's getting printed? They're saying, we'll give a fraction of it to the people. Most of it goes to the big businesses, and they buy assets, or government. And it's the government itself, the World Bank, the Treasury, these organizations are actually talking about, we're going to actually buy shares. What does that mean? It means nationalization. Communism, socialism. The government is buying the companies, because if you're buying shares, you buy the company. If you're a shareholder, you own the company. Warren Buffett says, if I own a share in a company, I consider myself an owner of that company, because that's what shares are. So when the government's buying the shares, the government's buying the company. So the government's nationalizing big industry. The government's saying,
So what do you reckon? Silver, precious metals?
So if you a tip for the viewers, if you haven't heard Mike Maloney or Robert Kiyosaki, get into their work. Robert Kiyosaki, the writer of Rich Dad Poor Dad, he wrote a book also called Fake Money, Fake Assets. Currency, the stuff that they give us, it's inherently worth nothing. It's a concept. If we say it's worth something and you'll give me something real for it, if you give me a banana for my $2, then my $2 is worth something. Otherwise, it's worth 5 cents, a $2 coin. A $100 note, I think, is worth 20 cents. That's what it costs to make. So it's a creative thing. Like Bitcoin, and that you can sort of see it with Bitcoin. If people want it, then it's worth something. If people don't want it, then it's worth nothing. And you know, with cryptos, like a lot of cryptos have gone to being worth pretty much nothing. Like all these random fake kind of currencies that are just like, they're just scam coins, they call them. Well, that's the Australian dollar is a scam coin as well. Or at least it is if people decide, hey, this stuff's not worth much anymore.
Which it isn't now.
The more they print, the less it's worth. And if you look at the history of money, it's already lost like 95% of its value. So what you could buy, if you look at when the explorers and that, you look at early like colonial Australia, what did it cost for a loaf of bread? It's like a fraction of a penny. And then eventually went to cents and dollars and whatever. We changed from their money. But it was a fraction of a penny, like what you could buy. And it was like a pound would buy you a big chunk of land. You know what I mean? And they did use real money at that time, which was gold and silver. The nickels in the US, I think it was the nickels, is the nickel at 25 cents? I don't know. But they were actually they were still using silver until the 1970s. But once silver became more valuable because the currency kept getting devalued so much, they had to take them out of circulation. And the history of money is something very, very interesting. And you want to understand the history of money. So Mike Maloney is a guy to get into with that. Like I listen to Mike Maloney most days.
Has he got a YouTube channel and books as well?
Great YouTube. Yeah, he has a book, free book. So there's a book that you can download. I bought it on Audible so that I could listen to it because I knew I'd get through it sooner.
Yep.
But yeah, Mike Maloney's YouTube channel, goldsilver.com is like his website. But yeah, you want to understand that. So for 5,000 years, gold and silver have had value. Maybe longer, but at least 5,000 years, gold and silver have had value. And that's kind of means for exchange. Right now, gradually, like we've stopped being educated about that. Like I speak to people who know a lot about finance and people who've got economics degrees and they have lots of investments. And you ask them about gold and silver, and they're like proud to say they know nothing about it. They took it out of the education about wealth education, so financial advisors and things like that. It's just crazy once you start getting to the history of what's actually gone on with currency and with money. So, I mean, one of the things in Real Movement is we encourage people. I realized last year that if you don't have financial stability, then you can't really be at your best. Like if you're struggling to organize yourself financially, and I hadn't experienced that for a while. I hadn't really experienced that too much in my life, to be honest. Like I'd lived really poor, but I was happy like that and living simply. But now having kids, having a wife, and then getting used to a lifestyle of travel and things, and having a certain cost to the business. And when things weren't going as well as they had been with the business, it's like, I can't actually be really creative from this point. Like there's a lot of stress coming in here. So now we talk a lot more about wealth generation, and we're not financial advisors. We don't advise people financially. I just share what I'm doing, and I share what I'm reading and what I'm learning about.
And that's been so interesting for myself because sometimes I'm ignorant towards money and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't really care about money. Don't need money to be happy. But now in Real Movement, as like you just said, there's more information coming out there for us to learn. It's like, I need to dial this in and like learn a bit more so I can understand more about myself moving forward, which has been cool. And that's pretty much what Real Movement is. It's a community of people who are striving to be better humans, learn more about ourselves, and pass on that knowledge to people. Hey,
it's about living well. Like, what's the best way to live? Just asking questions. If you keep asking that question, how can I live? How can I be living better? We address everything that we feel is important to living well, to living better. Gradually, it's becoming broader because of that, and we're incorporating different mentors and different experts. So, like, there's guys that have got multiple one-arm chin-ups, and there's guys that are great at weightlifting, and they're all the different aspects of physical training. There's a guy that's coached a lot of CrossFit Games athletes. There's a guy that has a press, log press world record. All different aspects of training, because I love physical development. I love the human body and what it's capable of. But I love the human mind. I love people, and I feel as though it just hurts me to see undeveloped people and lack of attention to self-development and personal development. And my experience is that once people experience what it's like to keep getting better and to it just becomes a way of life and a philosophy of living. And whether they continue to be part of Real Movement or they go and do their own thing, like they continue along that line of like, how can I improve myself? How can I improve my life? And so, yeah, now we have like people who are wealthy and people who have, you know, alternative experiences with business and finance and money. And I ask them questions, and basically, you know, selfishly, I'm building a network around myself of like, well, who are the best people that I can actually be able to drop a message to at any time and going to get an answer from, and then how can I have them format that information into bite-sized, you know, our courses are like 10-week courses, you know, 10 to 30 minutes a week. What's the minimum thing that to know enough about this to be able to live well? And if you want to go deeper and deeper, you've got access to those people, you've got access to the books and resources that they've found to be most valuable. So I've created this network around myself now, and like you've seen, like it's changed a lot, what it is now to what it used to be. But
pumping now.
The last 12 months, and yeah, even the last 6 months, last 3 months, last month, it's just better and better. And I just love it because I'm basically got the opportunity to speak with a world leader or world record holder or someone who's really at the top of the game in every single aspect, whether that's grip strength training, one-arm chin-up, finances, business growth, cryptocurrency.
Life.
So it's in lots and lots of different areas. And we probably need to go further with this mental, spiritual, religious type stuff. But I mean, yeah, that's the fun of it, is like continuing to evolve and to solve. And like, what I've been researching last night, I was watching on YouTube with my daughter. We were watching people set up their bullet journals. So I was late to the meeting today with Brando, and I've had this realization lately of like my system of journaling and scheduling my life is not working. Like my life's got a lot busier. I have more appointments, I have more commitments, and I don't just keep them well in the front of my brain. And if I'm trying to keep them in the front of my brain, then other stuff's not in the front of my brain. So I need a better system. So last night I was researching that. I'm like thinking about, okay, like how do we do this with Real Movement? Because bullet journaling is like a really like a freestyle, free flow form of journaling and organizing your life, which could be really spiritual, or it could be really like project management, or it could be like tracking what you love on Netflix and what you loved on YouTube. And it's like super open, and there's like all these different formats. It's really interesting and creative. And I'm thinking like, okay, how does this fit for Real Movement? Like, because we're developing a Real Movement journal at the moment, but it's much more along the lines of like your best self and like a lot of these productivity journals that are out there, which are great. But then that's an evolution of like, okay, so some people are going to actually want to go hardcore with this, like more like a bullet journaling style, but how does that fit for coaches and for people who love the gym? And how do you track that stuff within this format? And it's an accountable life. It's a conscious life. And for me, it's a better life. Like I lived unconsciously. I lived drinking a lot. I've lived a lot of different styles of life. I've tried a lot of different types of diets. I've tried a lot of different types of nutrition. And the best of it is what I sort of put forward, and I challenge people to challenge me and just live in their best way. And to me, this is like, that's what we need to be doing. Like guys like Brian Rose, guys like Joe Rogan, like they're encouraging people like, go live your best life, you know? And I guess I feel as though those things are great, but where are the tools? You know, where's the community? Like if Joe Rogan had his own tribe, like, but he's just, he's kept that distance of like, I'll just do the podcast and then you go work it out, which is cool. And a lot of people take up BJJ on the back of that, or they take up podcasting as him as the role model. Like that's probably why I started podcasting. It's probably off the back of him. But at some stage, it's like, well, where does that person go? The person gets fired up listening to Jordan Peterson, and it's, but then where does that person go? I know that it's about tribe. Like it has to be about tribe. In teams, footy teams, if it's a shit footy team versus a good footy team, the athlete will be a completely different athlete. They'll perform differently. Their mind will work differently. The way they eat, their habits, their drinking, their sleep. If they're in a super positive, productive team versus a team that's bottom of the ladder that has a toxic culture, same player, you see that all the time in footy, right? That's humans, that's us, that's society, that's life. You're not going to perform your best if you're not in that winning team. So what does that winning team looks like? And it's not about that team crushing that team as it is in footy. Like Real Movement doesn't have to crush anyone. We're not crushing CrossFit. CrossFit's amazing. They do their thing. What's the next evolution on that? Like how do you take that more into helping people to be better financially? How do you take that more into other aspects of training as well, like having splits, having one-arm chin-ups, having these things that, aren't necessarily part of CrossFit. Cool, do that. If you want to do CrossFit, do that. But then there's this other stuff that's like, I prefer that better and it works better and you get less injuries. And as far as the training system goes, but system of life, system of living.
That's it. That's a system of life, because that's what it's so powerful for me at the moment. Whenever I'm struggling with anything in life, I can pretty much go to Real Movement, reach out to anyone, or even look at the content on there, and there's something there to help me, or something that's on the bookshelf that Real Movement has pushed me towards that can help me with that. And it's so crazy, like when people hit me up and ask me what I'm doing and stuff like that, and like I'm no guru at half the stuff that's in Real Movement, but I implement it and try and keep trying and reach out to people and just every day trying to get better. And it's like, it's fucking changed my life. And when, like you said, when you know that this is how good you can be and what you're kind of striving for, why even fucking look the other way and like want to turn back when you've got all these people in this community just pushing, getting better, praising you, asking you what can you do better, just growing you. And it's like, why not? Like exactly the same with food. Why fucking not eat good food? It's so crazy. Like, and I got my good friend Jummy onto it the other day. He's always been dabbling into it, but I was like, man, everything you're after, for like, just invest in yourself. Like small amount of investment for what you can get. You got more. I've never been to uni, but there's a ton load of shit on there that I know people at uni who wouldn't know half of the stuff in there about life. You know what I mean? And yeah, so it's been massive for me, and I thank you for that, for helping me in that direction. And for people who want to just get started, what would you say? Like, where to start? Where would you start for people that just are kind of lost at the moment and know that there's more in you? You know, everyone has that. Oh, there's something that I'm missing here or whatever, and it's just implementing that. And I feel a lot of people right now, where it's kind of been, a lot of people are kind of searching for that now because they've got time to themselves and their externals are kind of being shut. I see it a lot. So where do you think people should just start?
It's kind of like what we were talking about before we started, like of closing the gap. Like the fun of life is closing the gap. So what's the gap? The gap is where you are versus where you want to be. So don't mind the gap, as in the London underground has the thing, mind the gap, and they have the shirts and that. The fun is the gap, right? So there's always going to be a gap. You're never going to close the gap in terms of being exactly where you want to be in every aspect of life. The gap is where the fun is.
The journey there.
So, but you have to set some kind of a destination. If a ship leaves the port, Bob Proctor, one of my mentors, the biggest investment I ever made in myself in self-development was to spend time one-on-one with Bob Proctor.
How much did that cost?
$65,000.
65
US. For like 6
straight
days.
Up. Pay him straight up?
I might have made 2 payments, I don't remember.
Fuck.
But it takes balls, right? And I was scared of doing that, like, because you always get that fear thing. People are scared investing $100 a month in Real Movement. Like, Real Movement's no contract now; it's $100. People are scared to put that $100 in. Like, what if it's a scam? I've done 65K, so I don't feel any kind of. I understand it. I feel some empathy, but I'm like, if you can't make that kind of decision, like, good luck. Ultimately, it's still your journey. So I want to see, you got to back yourself to a point. But yeah, close the gap. So what's the gap? If a ship leaves the port and it hasn't decided where it's going to, what are the chances are that it's going to arrive somewhere good? What are the chances are it's going to arrive to its, a destination? If you don't set the destination, then there's no chance of you arriving there. So you have to choose something. And people are like, well, I can't choose. Like, I don't know what I want. I'm lost. What do I want? No one's really lost. People are just scared to write it down, scared to actually isolate it. And it doesn't matter if it changes in the future. Like, you can get halfway to Los Angeles from Sydney and go, no, actually, you want to go to Honolulu. Or actually, no, I'm going to go to Alaska. Just change route. No issue. But you have to choose to start with. Otherwise, you have nowhere to go. Like, you literally walk out of the you go out of the driveway here if you haven't decided where you're going, you can't know whether to turn left or right. You just keep, you keep turning left. You're just going around in circles. And that's how a lot of people live their life in that way, or they're just kind of on the default programmed mode of unconsciousness of watching whatever the next thing is on Netflix and doing the job that they're kind of their parents and school and whatever has kind of said, well, yeah, you probably should go in that direction.
That fucking sucks. That fucking sucks. Lux. And I see people there.
Yeah. So it's like choose something. Like choose what inspires you. What are you interested in? What do you do in your free time? And I can always find in someone something that they're interested in. And sometimes they can't see it for themselves, but everyone has some kind of fire in them of something that they're interested in, whether it's plants or ants or pants or whatever it is. Like there's something that you're like, yeah, I'm into that. Like that interests me. So go being the best in the world at that. Like initially you might not be able to see like being the best in the world or being great. Best in the world is a small number. Like if you're going to be best in the world at the 100 meters, like there's one person that does that. But to be great is simple. It's a decision. So to be in the top 1% in anything is just a decision. If you want to be the top 1% in the world of jugglers, just juggle every day, get the best tutor, start talking to the guys who are the top, and within a certain period of time, you'll be in the top 1% of jugglers. And you'll be so far ahead of the rest of humanity in terms of hand-eye coordination and eyes and all those sorts of things. So anyone can become great. You can't necessarily be the best in the world, but you can be great. But you have to decide what you're going to be great in. And that's the thing that's been stolen from us is our ability to choose. Make a choice. You're a sovereign being, choose. So that's the thing, like choose. Choose something. And if you go down that path, you're like, I'm going to be a sumo wrestler. And I just start today. I'm just eating tons and tons of rice. I'm getting fat. I'm just learning about sumo wrestling. And then, a year later, I'm like, hey, this feels really bad. Like I struggle getting out of the car. I'm not really that into the G-strings anyway. and I go like, nah, that's not for me. I'll lose the weight. But at least I went all in my dream for a while and I know what that feels like. And I can tell a story to kids like, yeah, I did this year preparing to be a sumo wrestler and this is what happened.
You're evolving, yeah.
That shit's going to go viral on YouTube. You can make a career out of just a year where you just go fully, like everyone's fascinated by people who go all in on things. You're not fascinated by someone who's just kind of browsing and dabbling and trying a little bit of this and that. Like,
well, can I stop you there? That is what's fucking happening right now with this podcast. Me and Jummy, he done a 50-kilometer run the other day. Like that's nuts. I don't even like running or whatever. And just with me and my training, he goes, let's sign up for 70.3 at Mooloolaba. So it's half Ironman. And I'm like, okay, I need a challenge here. Football's done. I'm like, okay, I'll sign up for it. Whatever. Boom. 19 weeks to prepare for it. 2-kilometer swim, 90-kilometer bike. Haven't fucking sat on a bike for that long. 21-kilometer run. Never ran that far ever. And then the other day he ran 30 kilometers, just a run. And I was like, fuck it. I'm getting up. I'm doing a 30-kilometer run. Did the 30-kilometer run, 3 hours. Fucking ankles and knees are like still a little bit sore today.
When did you do it? How long ago?
Not yesterday, day before.
Yeah.
The amount
longest
of
run ever
that I've done.
Yeah.
The amount of people who have just
that's what matters. What you've
out.
done. It doesn't matter what the longest run in history. Like people don't do it because they're like, oh, it's not what Dave. Just do for you. Do your best ever and see what it feels like.
Yeah, and that feeling. But then the amount of people that kind of were like, what the fuck, like, and then reached out and were like so much, man, so much, like same as podcast. And then Jummy the other day goes, because we're kind of on this little traction at the moment, and he said, why don't we had this conversation? People just really like to like things that just stand out and are just like half crazy, and they're like, fuck, like these guys just did this, like that's crazy. So he said to me, next Saturday, let's do 100 kilometers. And I'm like, is this going to be more fucking detrimental than like good for me? And so I reached out to my mate who's an ultra runner, my uncle, and they said no.
There's a few guys in Real Moon as well.
Really?
Yeah, 100Ks and stuff.
No, you can fully do that. Like it's all mental. Like if they said you need 6 months training, I'd be like to Jimmy, oh fuck, dude. Like we might need to like think about this maybe a bit longer. But when we sat down, we said, so we're going to do a little mini documentary on just two dudes that are like, fuck it, we're going to do 100 kilometers. And I think the amount of respect and people that are like, fuck, if these guys can do this, like 100 kilometers is like fucking 16 hours or something of running. And people kind of get drawn to that. So like back to what you were saying.
Massively.
Like I'm just realizing that now
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Che Guevara was the epitome of that in political commitment. You know, he put his life on the line in so many different ways, and whether you love him or hate him, like, he was committed, you know, and I think that's the thing that we struggle with so much now is, so the first thing is, like, to choose something that you want to do, or choose to live a committed life in terms of, like, I'm going to go all in on something, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. And it's like, people think I'm about juggling, whatever. It doesn't matter if it's juggling, if it's surfing, if it's whatever it is. And don't do it, you know, maybe you want to do something just for the novelty of it to boost your YouTube or Instagram or whatever. Like, this doesn't make you a bad person, especially if the motive is like that it's going to empower other people. Like, if you just keep doing freaky stuff because it's like, well, I think I'm going to scare some people out of their shell, then happy days. You know, if that's your purpose to encourage people to think, well, what if I could do that? And then go do it. But you got to make that choice, and then one thing, like, choose to live a committed life, or choose that you're going to do your best at something, and then get around people.
Get around the community.
You're just not going to do it on your own.
No.
That's the biggest myth for men. And what happens when you try and do things on your own is you get mentally unwell. Like, I heard about one of my friends died the other day. I'm not sure what it was. I kind of half-assed his wife, but I don't know. You know, but the first thing that comes to mind, like, is that guy couldn't go on with his life. You know what I mean? And that happens way too much now. Trying to solve it on your own, it's just not. That's not how humans are meant to work. And this is probably my criticism with the Jordan Peterson stuff. Like, there's that individualistic component to it. Everyone's better in a team. In my experience, like, humans are tribal. Like, it's like an ant. Is an ant going to live well on its own, or does an ant live with other ants? Like, does a bee have its own hive, or does a bee have a crew and a queen? And you know what I mean? I'm not talking about the hierarchy. Like, hierarchies are different in different tribes, and I'm not too sure about that. But humans are tribal beings. Like, there's no evidence that we're meant to be every man for himself. And that goes with food, that goes with shelter, that goes with looking after the kids. The more it's like every man for himself, the worse it is. That's not human. That's not natural. That's not what we are. We're not, you know, like, monkeys don't do it. The monkey doesn't decide, like, all right, this is all up to me now. I'm just going to go do my own thing. There's a clan size and there's a thing, and we're meant to have a clan. We're meant to have a tribe. How big that is, like, you can look at, like, is it meant to be 150 and the Dunbar's number and this sort of stuff of, like, what's mentally healthy? How many people do you need? You know, 4 or 5 really close friends, and then 150 people you can sort of rely on that are pretty cool. I've had it. Like, Real Movement last year was pretty much dead, and there was not much going on. Like, 2018, it pretty much died. Like, I just lost direction with it, and I was doing other things. We bought the house and 2 young kids and renovations and whatever. Mentally, I was not good through that period. Like, I know what it feels like to be socially isolated and feel like no one's heading in the same direction that I'm in, and I'm not helping anyone, and no one's really helping me. And when you feel like that, the more you feel like that, the worse your life is. When it's like, these people want to see me do well. These people are helping me to do what I want to do, and I'm helping these people. It could be reciprocal with the same people, or it could be other people. Everyone wants to be a valuable tribe member, you know. So that's why people fall into alcohol and a lot of the organized crime and stuff like that. Because if you're in a gang, if you're in a mafia, then at least you're connected. That's the word they use in the mafia. Like, everyone's meant to be connected.
Yeah.
So you got to find your connections. Like, choose to live a great life. Choose greatness. You know, School of Greatness. Like, that's a cool podcast. Lewis Howes. School of Greatness. Like, choose greatness. Choose. Like, choose, and don't be afraid of, like, well, I'm never going to be good at that. That's a lie. No scientist knows your potential. No scientist knows how good you can get. Maybe you can't get to being the fastest person in the world, but you can get damn fast, and you can have a lot of fun trying to get faster, and you can learn a lot about it. You can make a career out of it, and you can teach a lot of other people how to get fast. Whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter what the thing is, but you have to have something that you're improving on. In my experience, when you don't have that thing, life is very, very tough. So you know, for so many people that don't have that thing, they don't have that thing of, like, I'm getting better at this thing. And the more you can put it to the service of others, the better you look after yourself. And it's there in Buddhist quotes and that sort of thing. Like, the most selfish thing you can do is to help other people. For the sake of our own safety and the sake of our own survival. Like if my survival is my main priority, and that's how I'm genetically programmed to survive, it pretty much makes sense that that's how I'm programmed. Like my number one priority is for me to survive. Maybe somewhat wide in for my kids to survive, but for me to survive, what I need right now for my best chance of survival is for humanity to wake up. Because Facebook and YouTube and these things are not on board with my philosophy of life. So that puts me in danger.
100%.
So the only way I can be safe is to encourage other people to think, is this system trying to make you healthy? Is this system trying to make you mentally, physically healthy? Is it a system for you thriving? If the answer is yes, then okay. But if the answer is no, then what are we creating? What's the alternative? What are we going to build that goes in contra of this? If they're shutting down the gyms, why are they shutting down the gyms? Like, why is this the end of CrossFit? Why is this the end of community gyms? Are community gyms a bad thing or a good thing? People don't go to church anymore. So there's been a war on that too. They took religion out of schools and things like that. For our generation, it's kind of cool to like be separate to religion and think of like organized religion as a bad thing. What did religion provide when everyone went to the church? Connectivity, common ground, safety. You'd be happy to talk to that person. You'd be happy to ask them for help. And that was in every community. Now what is it? Now it's individualistic. Now it's like, I don't even know who that neighbor is, right? So regardless of the doctrine of the church, and there's definitely things to criticize within that, the history of the Catholic Church, the current Catholic Church, and lots of different churches, they have their challenges within them. But you can't argue with the concept of connectivity. Social isolation is proven to be one of the biggest risk factors for death. If you feel socially isolated, your health outcomes in every aspect are poor. And that's well, that's clear in the research. It's a bigger risk factor than smoking. It's not healthy, it's not safe to feel socially isolated. And so what's happening at the moment? Self-isolation, social distancing. Two worst things for mental health, clearly documented. So how much is that going to stick? People are scared to make eye contact and say hello, or they were at least when this stuff fired up, at whatever distance. So it was impacting people's feeling of like, is this person safe,
Fuck.
So what's the direction? What's the future? Is there really a pandemic that's going to knock out the world's population of birds or ants or whatever it is? Like, is that a legit thing that we should give up all our freedoms for? And this is a question that, every individual has to answer right now. And it is a difficult one because it's difficult if one person has a different answer to another person. One person says, yes, this is worth giving up our freedom for indefinitely. But no one's getting out of this thing alive. No one gets out of life alive. So the question is just, what's a good life and how do we live?
Yeah, 100%. Well, brother, that's coming up to an hour 40, but do you want to do some rapid questions?
Sure.
I've got a couple here that why organ meats?
They're the most nutrient-dense foods. Lion makes a kill. It eats the organ meats and goes away. If there's traffic around, hyenas and stuff, they eat the most valuable part and they take off. Native Indians, Americans, cut the liver out, eat the liver, take the liver. If there's time to deal with the rest of the animal, then you do that. Brains, bone marrow, these are the foods that every animals that eat meat, that's what they want. We're the same. They're the most nutrient-dense parts. They're the parts that help us to thrive. Read Nutrition, Physical Degeneration, Weston A. Price. The superfoods, the special foods are there. The modern doctrine of if it fits your macros, it's not a human doctrine. It's not a doctrine that comes from a place of health. It's a doctrine that comes from a place of how do I get on stage in 12 weeks? Fine, whole different question. If we want to live great, we need to consider what's a human diet. How do other animals eat is a great way to understand.
100%.
How do they live?
What's your morning routine?
Get up, make the bed, cold shower, salt and apple cider vinegar, journal, brush my teeth and tongue scrape. Tongue scraping is probably one that a lot of people don't do.
You still oil pulling or no?
Sometimes I'll oil pull if I feel like I need to. I've been doing a little bit lately, but not all the time. That's journal, like write down my goals. I write down my goals for the month. Usually, sometimes I write down my ideal, but it's usually like 1 and 3 months. The lifetime goal stuff for me is like pretty well ingrained, like what my purpose in life is and what I'm going towards. So it's more the short term ones that are.
You meditating or not?
Not lately. Super busy.
Yeah.
I probably should be making time for it, but
journal is kind of a source of meditation as well. Like,
I lay in the sun a bit. I'll get in the sun, but yeah, to be honest, like often I'll get back to DMs in that time. Like I am battling to keep up with messages and stuff at the moment, but I'm living my purpose, and like Real Movement has more than tripled in the last month. So I want to do my best to give those people the best experience of Real Movement and help them to understand that I really do care and I want them to live a great life. So there's definitely an element of sacrifice for that. You know what I mean? So you got to weigh up your decisions. And my understanding of the way the world is right now, it's not a time for me to have a health fetish. It's a time for me to have to go all in on helping people to live their best and just to make good decisions about how they're living.
Yeah, 100%. I can kind of feel that as well. Nighttime routine.
I don't really have one at the moment. I'm usually just so tired by the end of the day.
What time's phone down though?
Yeah, like I'm not doing that at the moment. Like I'm honestly, most of the time at the moment, I set my Audible thing on like the timer to sleep. My mind's pretty busy at the moment. Like I'm going crazy hard.
You sleeping all right?
Most of the time, yeah. Yep. During the just after the fast, because I did a 72-hour fast, that night after I ate and then I went to bed, and then that night I woke up at like 12 and I thought it was morning already because I've been waking up usually when it's still dark. So I got up, had my cold shower, like brushed my teeth. And then my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, and she was pretty angry. Like she was like, "What are you doing?" and I was like, "Just brush my teeth." And then I thought from her tone, like maybe it's not morning yet. It was like midnight. So I went downstairs, did some work for a while with my screen on like night mode. Yeah. So there's like a night mode on Flux. Not where it's orange, but where it's like inverted colors. So it's like a black screen almost. So I did like 2 hours work and then went back to bed. So then I was like pretty, yesterday I was a little bit tired and my strength numbers weren't that great in the gym. And yeah, I was pretty tired last night, but like, yeah, I've been going all in. So
yeah, that's so good. What's your main weakness at the moment?
I've got so many weaknesses. You know, I never, you know,
what are you dealing with now? That's
my biggest struggle at the moment, if I'm honest, is it's with my family. You know, it's probably with my partner, with my wife. Like I really love her, and we have 2 beautiful children, and I love them so much. And it is really a challenge for me to have this growth with Real Movement and with my dream, and you know, it's what I've been fully committed to since my early 20s, and to try to, you know, they came into my life after that. They came into my life at 30, my kids, and to have all of those things go in the right direction at the same time is something that's really challenging. And I love coaching people to live their dream, and sometimes I struggle with people who don't want to be coached, or it's not clear what their dream is, or their actions don't go along with their ideals. And I know that my personality type is different to other personality types, and I'm really driven, and not everybody wants this kind of life. Like some people, it's more about feeling, it's emotions, it's different things. So my biggest challenge is that with my wife, and like understanding how she wants to live, and
her needs and wants.
And trying to find that softness within myself as well. Like there's definitely a militant aspect to my personality, and a side to me that I like being that person, and then going from that person back to like being able to chill out with the kids. And you know, the brain games of social media and that sort of stuff is like super, you know, dopamine, it's rush, it's very addictive behavior. And I'm aware of that. At the same time, like I'm making that sacrifice at the moment. I can easily put my phone down and stop doing all that stuff, like forever. I could stop today. But at the moment, if I did that, I feel it would have a massive negative impact on my life purpose. So I make the decision to continue to do those things, and then it's difficult to transition personalities. It's who I need to be for my wife and my kids is different to who I need to be for social media and for Real Movement. So, that's
there's something there though. You just want the best for them too. Yeah.
100%. I want the best for my wife, for my kids, and I'm working super hard. Our training partners are here, so it's nearly getting to training time. Oh, brother.
Benny, still. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to keep getting. I want to keep getting better. I want to keep growing this thing out. I feel as though there's an opportunity where this could go and reach millions of people in the next year. Like the way the world is now, things can go viral, things can go big. There's so many pieces of the puzzle to fill in. And so I want to fill those pieces in. But I also want to help my daughter to be able to swim and ride a bike and all those normal kind of things. And a lot of the most successful people who I look up to, like they're divorced. They separated. A lot of the most successful strength coaches or, even Jobs and Musk and all these guys, like, not that I put myself in that category, but like it's a challenge. The challenge is real.
Yeah, for sure. And last one, bro. If you had one book to give me, what would it be?
One is tough.
3.
Well, the nutrition physical degeneration is such a powerful thing, because if your brain is wired right and it's made out of good stuff, then it's a lot easier to live better.
So Weston A. Price.
I think that's the book of the podcast.
Yeah.
I have a list of hundreds, and I love books and I love reading and learning. Like Gold and Silver, like the Mike Maloney one is probably at the moment, like understanding wealth cycles and understanding the economy. Like it's probably a really good time for that.
Yeah.
Rich Dad Poor Dad goes pretty well with that.
No, I think Weston A. Price for sure is book for listeners
book of the podcast.
Yeah, to get, bro. Like that's a start. Like if you want to start,
or just get the PDF. Like you can probably get it online, or just flick through blog posts about it. Like the concept. To be honest, like I haven't read it cover to cover, but it's still changed my life deeply.
No,
not every book needs to be read cover to cover to change your life. Like that's something that we get indoctrinated into as well. Like you're a bad person if you don't read it word for word. Just look at the picture, understand the pictures, understand the concepts, ask questions, talk to a few people about it, listen to a few podcasts. You'll have that concept. If you've got that concept, you're ahead of 99.9% of the population, and you're in a position to live well for yourself and make better decisions when you go shopping. Feed your kids in a bigger and better way. Like so powerful. Don't worry about like so much behavioral and psychological therapy. If you're not made out of good stuff, it's going to be really difficult to get the most out of your brain and the spiritual life. If you need to at that chemical level, like even with the yogis and their fasting and that sort of stuff, they're getting into deep ketosis, right? So the brain's getting fueled by the good stuff, and then they can think better and they can live better. So get to the fundamental, get to the biochemistry of health together with the spiritual, psychological, mental side.
100%, brother. Man, I could have sat here for hours speaking to you. But, really appreciate everything you've done for me. And, you always be a part of my life and my kids' life and everything like that. So that's pretty powerful. And if people want to find you?
Keegan? Instagram is where I'm most responsive. Keegan Real. I'm on pretty much all the channels, but that's the one where probably I put out, I share onto my Instagram story and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I have a podcast as well, Keegan Smith Experience. If you enjoyed the podcast and you want to jump to another podcast, you've already listened to all Brandos.
Interesting, your podcast, bro. On, always learn something.
Keegan Smith Experience. A couple of the last ones of getting a good buzz. So I appreciate the kind words there, Brando, as well. And like, I can't do anything on my own. Like, what's cool is like you see some stuff, it resonates with you, and then you make it your own. Like, it does sound a bit cultish when you hear this stuff about Real Movement and that, but it's really about you living your dream. And if I can assist that in any way, or I can connect you with other people, like you'll tell me as well that there's like 20 other people in Real Movement that have had a positive impact on your life. Like, so it's not me, it's not my information. It's me connecting you to the best of what I've done and a bunch of other people who are on the same sort of buzz. And it is eclectic. It's open to different ideas, and there's all sorts of different leaders in there. So I think that's an important thing as well. Like you living your dream, you getting a podcast off the ground, and like that's what I am excited about. Like this is results of why I love Real Movement and why I love what I get to do for a living. So I'm on my purpose. Life's good. I want you to be on your purpose and your life to be good, and so on. Like that's domino effect. Like that's what the world needs right now. So let's do it.
Legend, brother. Love you.
Sure, bro.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you.